All right, happy Monday and welcome to the MDMade Podcast. I'm your host, Resa Lovelace, Assistant AD for Student Athlete Development, bringing you this week's podcast, More Than an Athlete, Centering Black Voices in Career Readiness. As a reminder, the MDMade Podcast provides timely, relevant, and practical information to empower student athletes to explore their potentials and pursue their passions. This week's episode is very special. Today, we are celebrating Black History Month by having a discussion about Black voices in career readiness. We are going to explore what it's like to be a Black student athlete at a historically white institution, how Black student athletes find their voice through activism, and how they utilize the resources available to them to find their purpose. So joining me today is Max Myers, current senior student athlete on the Maryland Men's Track and Field program, and Bryan Pointer, academic advisor in the School of Public Health and current PhD student at the University of Maryland. You two have both been featured on our podcast before, but feel free to give our listeners a brief introduction of your background and why it's important that we celebrate Black History Month. So Max, how about you get us started? What's your background and why do you celebrate Black History Month?
So my name is Maxwell Myers, as was said. I'm a senior here at University of Maryland studying computer science. I'm also the captain of the track and field team, and my career aspirations are to be a software engineer. And I'd say that it's important to celebrate Black History Month because it's just kind of important to know where we came from, know the people that kind of started everything that we're working off of right now. It's very inspiring to kind of look at not even our ancestors, but people that are just one or two generations back that paved the way for us. And I think it really just kind of gives me hope in a lot of spaces. But yeah.
All right, Bryan, tell us more about your background and why you celebrate Black History Month, or how you celebrate Black History Month.
Yes, I am Bryan Pointer, advisor here in the School of Public Health, PhD student in the Department of Kinesiology. From Philadelphia, the best city in the world. Former track and field student athlete at Delaware State University. And why, I think, Max kind of hit it, the nail on the head right there. One, just really standing on the shoulders of giants and really, paying homage to the people that paved the way for where we are today. Of course, like Max said, it's important to celebrate our ancestors, but, those that aren't, too far away from us right now, I think that, African Americans, we've made leaps and bounds, from hundreds of years ago. So it's always great to highlight those that have come before us and, set us up for success. And then, whether that's doing service activities or, going to see, lectures or just learning, more histories from documentaries. I think just taking the time to really intentionally look at the history of what we do and how far we've come.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have both of y'all on this week's episode because I think oftentimes when we think about Black history or when we're having this conversation, we're always coming from a space of trauma, right? And I think today we'll hit on a little bit of that, but I think more of today's conversation is around how we celebrate individuals, right? How we continue to develop who we are and make sure that we're changing this country for the better of supporting everyone and not just a few. So Max, I want to start with you. Obviously, you're competing here as a track athlete, and you chose to come to Maryland, which is a historically white institution. Tell us what that experience has been like, and maybe what you've learned about yourself in the process.
I'd say the experience has been it's been very interesting the whole time I've been here. But I would say just in general, I'm very glad with the decision I made to come to Maryland. I feel kind of in a way being thrown into an environment where I'm the only Black person in a lot of spaces. It has allowed me to kind of get thicker skin in a lot of spaces and kind of just prepare myself for the real world a lot before actually going out into the real world. I've had my fair share of challenges and stuff like that, but I feel most of the challenges and stuff that I faced have kind of had me go through some character development that have allowed me to become a stronger person, if that makes sense. So I kind of take the experiences that I've had at University of Maryland so far, and I think they've all crafted me to make be a better and stronger person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That makes a lot of sense. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Oh yeah. Just from going from like the academic spaces and stuff like that, like struggling in classes and stuff, and not necessarily having like as big of a network of people to reach out to and stuff like that. Because especially being on the track team, like I'm the only like computer science student in my grade, like within athletics. And so like there's a lot of other majors where like, you know, like some of your teammates are in the same classes as you and stuff like that. So like you might be able to figure some stuff out that way. But like for the majority of the time I've been in school, like I've been the only like computer science student within my grade. So having to kind of figure a lot of stuff out myself and kind of bang my head and like stub my toes and stuff like that along the way has kind of like it was difficult while I was going through that process. But I think like all in all, like it's gave me some skills that like I would not like trade for anything, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And like obviously being able to watch your growth too, and like how you've even utilized your major's resources, right? I think a lot of student athletes automatically feel like they should only use the resources from an athletic perspective. But even watching you navigate the computer science space and say, like, nope, I'm here. I want to be just like my peers in this space. Like, and taking up that space and saying, like, how do I get the access that everybody else is getting? Even though in some ways I'm working a full-time job being an athlete. I think that speaks volumes to me as somebody who's in your space often, but I hope that that speaks volumes to your peers. Yeah. And so, Bryan, you and I both come from a historically Black institution. For those who are watching, you can see Delaware State hanging up in his background. But you also competed as a Black student athlete on a track and field team. Tell us what your experience was like at a historically Black college, and maybe what did you learn about yourself during that experience?
Yeah, man, I think going to an HBCU literally changed my life, like for the better. And I needed to go to an HBCU coming from, the Germantown section of Philadelphia. And really just looking at my education, in the Philadelphia public school system really didn't empower us or inspire us to, be great professionals. So coming into Delaware State, academic and intelligent, if we want to say it, intelligent confidence, if that even makes sense, was really at an all-time low. I really wasn't sure of, all the skills, the skills and abilities that I had to, be a great professional, whatever that was. So I majored in sport management because I played sports. Like that just made sense. My parents didn't go to school, so I had no idea, what I was doing. So being surrounded, by so many Black students that were doing amazing things, so many, professional staff, faculty members that were doing amazing things, they all, empowered me and showed me all the potential possibilities, that my life could be. And, even, as a track and field athlete, there were so many skills that I learned of, how to be a leader, how much I really enjoyed helping people. And I think those two experiences, I'm like, okay, like, I know I love helping, my teammates. I love helping other athletes, encouraging other athletes. I really, grew as a student within the classroom. And I was like, even though I'm surrounded by, all Black people, once I left Delaware State, you couldn't tell me anything. So by the time I got to Westchester, and even if I was, only one of two Black students, at a PWI and sitting in the classroom, I was the sharpest one in that classroom, okay? You can call anybody, in that grad program and ask, but it really gave me the confidence to move forward as a professional, and really to shine light and prepare, Black student athletes for, going through higher education and, preparing them for their lives after. So really, like I said, inspired me to, look deeper within myself and the talents that I did have. And really helped me realize, that my life was bigger than me. And there were so many people that I could help move forward, based on my experience as an athlete. So changed my life for the better, really helped me grow and give me the confidence to shine in any room that I was going to be in, whether, it was a room full of, Black people or a room full of anyone. Like, I knew that I could stand on my own and really, have a, decent and amazing place within this world.
Yeah, thank y'all both for sharing that, because I think I wanted to start the conversation in that space, because you're both two Black men having two different experiences. But at the conclusion of it, I keep hearing the word confidence from both of y'all, no matter what your path was. And I think, since the summer of 2020, we've had a lot of conversation about should Black athletes go to Black schools, right? And I think, again, y'all are two great examples of like, you can still get the experience you want out of your college selection, no matter whether it be a historically Black institution or a historically white institution. So thank y'all for that. And as we talk about just being on campus, right, I think a lot of people, when we see Black men on campus, there's this stereotype that you're either a football player or you're a basketball player, right? And Bryan, you're still relatively young, and so I often wonder, do you still get these comments as a professional now? But how do y'all encounter those questions, and like, how do you show up in these spaces to maybe change people's perspectives of like, yes, I'm a young Black man on this campus, and for you, Bryan, it's I'm not an athlete, I'm actually a professional here. And for Max, for you, it is, no, I'm a track athlete, but I'm also a professional.
I would say, would you like to go first, Bryan?
No, go ahead. You take it away.
I guess I would say like most of the time, it's kind of like an ongoing joke with like my like computer science friends and stuff like that. But they're like, damn, like you're an athlete, like how do you do this? Like it's like every single time like me being an athlete comes up, it's like, how are you balancing this? How are you figuring everything out and stuff like that? So like I feel like in a way that it's kind of like I kind of take it as like a compliment, because like a lot of times people will see me and they'll be like, damn, like how are you making all of this work together? And I'm like, you know, like you just manage your time and like that's really it. Like it's nothing insane, like it's doable. Like there have been hard times and stuff like that, but I feel like most of the time when I'm talking to people, because like a lot of times when I go to class, it's like right after practice or right before practice. So like it's like less of an assumption, and it's like, because I have my backpack on, I have my practice clothes on, and people are like, what do you do? Are you on a team here or something like that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm on the track team. And they're like, how do you get through classes, and how do you manage your time? Because like I'm having trouble managing my time, and I'm just doing schoolwork. I'm not even working. I'm like, you know, like it's difficult, but like I made it work like for the past 4 years. It's really about discipline and stuff like that. But yeah.
So, all right, I got a lot to say. So I never experienced that at Dell State, really, like, because we were all just students. Everybody was trying to make it. And for the most part, everybody kind of knew everybody. At Maryland, you know, of course that changed. And even when I would, you know, my time at Westchester. So I often do get, you know, mistaken as a student, which I'm like, you know, that's not bad. You know, I feel like, you know, I'm still looking young. That's great. I still am young. But so I would say that not all people will see a Black man and just thinks like he automatically does participates in sports, but those that do have a physical stature, most people are going to, you know, make that assumption. You know, I haven't experienced it on campus, but you know, I was walking through the airport literally a few months ago, and I'm tall, I'm 6'4", I got on sweats, and people are like, oh, like, are you an athlete? Like, which one? Or they'll make a joke like, oh, what ball team do you play for? Oh, you're way up there. And, you know, I kindly correct them. I'm like, oh, no, I'm a doctor, even though I'm not a doctor yet. But it's still, you know, it's a great flex. But I think when either if I have the opportunity, I always try to help people understand, like, no, just because they have physical stature does not mean that they're an athlete. That really plays into, you know, the huge myth of the natural Black athletes, that African Americans are always just going to be great at physical labor because they're tall, because they have, you know, bigger and leaner muscles. So if I ever get encountered with it, I'm going to take some time, even if it's 5 minutes out of my day, to say something like, no, just because I'm tall doesn't mean that, you know, I have the athletic ability. Or a lot of, you know, Black men walking around campus that aren't athletes. So I forgot where I was going with that one. But no, it's always important to, one, like I said, provide that time and that education to help, you know, people either understand, like, you know, there are more abilities that I have, you know, than athletics, than my physical talents.
That's facts.
Yeah. And just, you know, taking the time, and that can seem like a big conversation, but even if it's 2 minutes, say something like, oh, no, I'm not an athlete because of this, this, and this. And I think I was spot on with that one.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Max.
I was about to say, I'll just jump off of that, because there's actually been times where I've been in the airport, like by myself, traveling and stuff. People are like, oh, what team are you on? Or like, who you play for or something. I'm like, oh, like I'm actually an engineer, Microsoft. Yeah. I mean, I also run track too, but like I'm an engineer. Yeah. And like, I like to like throw that in there just to like even and out, like I'm not just all athletics, like
Right.
I got smarts too, like yeah.
And I like that y'all are also speaking these things into existence, right? Like Bryan, you're working on your PhD. Max, you're a couple of months away from graduation. Like I love that y'all are censoring that, because I wonder how many of our students in general are like, no, I'm an athlete, but I'm also majoring, right? Like y'all are censoring where y'all are going first. And then, oh, by the way, I do X, Y, and Z. I think that's really important. And Bryan, I brought you into this conversation today because I also think that you provide a lot of resources to our students. And as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I think that Max has sought out his resources from athletics, but also from our campus. But in both of y'all's opinions, do you feel like higher education and athletics are providing enough resources and or experiences for our Black male and female student athletes? And again, just thinking beyond the concept that they are a part of sports. Bryan, I'll let you go first for that one.
Yes. So in my experience, make sure I say that because I'm not going to just generalize everyone. No, athletics or higher education are not providing enough resources for Black men and Black women. I think each institution, well, I will specifically say Westchester and the University of Maryland. There are people that are doing great work within their silos. So, at Westchester, that was the athletic mentoring program, really centering around meeting one-on-one with African-American students, because the graduation rate was 9% for young African-American men. So, my former graduate supervisor, Dr. Tammy James, she decided to initiate a program to specifically target the graduation rates. And it was just small touch points with her African-American men. But when you look at her interest, versus the institution, of course, that's something that Westchester knew. And I'm not, just blasting Westchester, but that wasn't a top priority for looking at, from an institution standpoint. So, Dr. James and, Dr. Tammy Hilliard Thompson, all the work that we were doing in the Multicultural Center, was aimed for Black men, but the institution at large, no. Maryland, we have, huge institution, 40,000 students. We have, great people that are doing great work within their silos. But I think when you really look at the totality of it, like, even in the athletic departments, like we know that it's a corporate mission for athletics. It's a business. You look at a basketball or a football game, you look at this spectacle and, the TV contracts. At the end of the day, it's about the student athlete and their experience. Like, one, is that always being heard from my perspective? No, it's not at all. Like, one, we have a business that needs to be run, and we have, a corporate mission that needs to be fulfilled that, of course, they're not going to come out and say that that's their top interest, but it's always been a difference between the philosophy and the mission of these institutions and of athletics, but then also the experiences of Black students. So there are people that are doing great work, but it is not being prioritized always.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I agree that like there are, like, for the people that specifically with like University of Maryland, like for the people who like fit into the programs like the Maryland Made program and like all of the programs we had through like that and through Gossip Fellows, through all of those types of programs, like it works for them. But like there are people that slip through the cracks a lot of the times. And I don't think enough is like done, particularly for the people that are slipping through the cracks. Because like me personally, like some of my teammates, like we're all in like the Maryland Made program, and we're all like, we all have the mentality that we're gonna like do something after we graduate. We're gonna like make sure that we hold each other accountable, this, that, and the third. But like on other sports teams, like people might not have those same mentalities. And so like I know like specifically, like if I didn't have like my older teammates or like some of my older peers like kind of like hammering that stuff down on me, then it probably would just not even slip my mind until I graduate and be like, all right, what am I going to do now? But I feel like a lot of the times with other teams and stuff like that, if you don't have like somebody that's kind of being a leader in those spaces, and helping like their younger teammates and kind of guiding them and making sure they're on the right like pathway, then a lot of people can slip through the cracks and not get into those programs and stuff like that, and like kind of start thinking about their career readiness. Because I feel like a lot of it has to do with like the culture of some teams and stuff like that. And if not everybody's head is there, then like not everybody's gonna like work out that way. So I feel like a lot is being done now. And we're on like an upward trend, but I still think that more can be done.
Right. And we can explicitly call it out. The culture of revenue generating sports is to participate, give all of your energy, your time and attention to, help this program win. And you think about a lot of those Black men that are participating in those sports are coming from poor, low working class communities. Not all, but, a majority of them. So coming from, those communities, coming to, college athletics, like, oh, this is my chance to make it, and this is the chance for, me to really, provide and, help my family with our economic dreams, our financial troubles. And the institution and the culture of those teams perpetuate that, which is like, oh no, this is a place where you can win. And I think that is when, people start to slip through those cracks, or it's just like, okay, I'm going to give so much time and attention to this where I don't have time to come to the Maryland Made program. I don't have time to come to centering Black voices in career readiness because I have so much to do with my sport. But those, we gotta somehow shift the culture within these programs to help these young Black men realize what they can do with their lives outside of sports.
Yeah, and then just going off of that, like when I look at like track and field in specific, like I'm lucky that like our coach Valman, he's very centered on like student first, then athlete. Like that is like probably one of his biggest things. So like if there's anything that like we need help with, anything we need like guidance on, like when it comes to like being a student, he's all for us being like successful in like those student spaces. But like I'm not sure if like other sports teams have the same focus that like our coach kind of instills like within our team, because the number one thing that he's all about is like academics, and like because you're a student first and then you're an athlete, like you can't compete if you don't have like the grades and stuff like that. So that kind of culture has like kind of helped me and a lot of my teammates stay focused and stay on track. But if the culture is just about, like being at practice, just only thinking about the sport all day, then like a lot of times when people graduate and stuff like that, then they're like, all right, like I was just in college for 4 years, but what do I do now? But yeah.
Yeah, I think Max, you hit on it. Like Coach Bauman, I feel like is always in Gossett Hall, whether he's stopping in my office or stopping in the academic advisor's office, because again, I think that he has created a culture on the team that says like, you're going to be here and you're going to compete here for 4 to 5 years. But then like the reality is y'all are going to go on and do something else. Right. And I think that's really important that he like centers who you are first and then expounds on that. Right. And I think Bryan, you hit on some components of like, yeah, we in our revenue generating sports often have students who are first generation, who are maybe coming from lower resource spaces and thinking about this is the pressure that is upon them to like be successful in their sport, to be able to give back to home. And I think sometimes we forget to like recenter the student in this new lifestyle of being a college student and then a college student athlete. I think sometimes we forget that like, yes, they are a prominent athlete and like we're just going to keep going through what they went from high school to us instead of like hitting the pause button and like resetting the focus. I think that's where we probably need to do more of that, because I don't know what your high school experience was like. I don't know what your home history or your past history is, but like how do we start again in this new space? And I think Max, you also mentioned like that peer-to-peer influence, right? Like your seniors and juniors, when you were first year, like they were like, nope, this is team culture. This is what we do. We jump into these programs. We exceed expectations. And I think you have now done that in a really great way. Last year, you came to Tim, who was our program director, and said, hey, like I want to create this program where Black students can come into a room and hear from professionals, right? Centering Black voices in career readiness. And so I am glad that you want to bring this back, again, for the second time, to give more students exposure to this conversation and be able to ask those questions. Tell me why it was so important to bring this program back.
I would say just in general, like from the feedback I had last year, so many people are like, wow, like I really learned something. Like, and even like some of my teammates that are like in the like same position where they're like, they've already worked internships and stuff like that. They've already had experience and stuff like that. Even like the people that I feel like had more knowledge than me in some spaces were like, I really learned a lot. Like I never kind of thought about some of the stuff that was talked about. And just thinking about like how successful it was last year and like how many people like took away stuff, I was like, I feel like we could really run this back, and like we could do it again, and we could have more like a bigger turnout and kind of like affect more people. Cause like at the end of the day, like just planning an event like that, like it takes a little bit of work, but it's like if the end goal is like you have people within your community like learning more about like these types of circumstances and like the type of experiences that they're going to be getting themselves into, then more people are going to be prepared. And then like you might inspire somebody to start doing some stuff on their own. Like, you know, somebody could like see an event like that and then go tell their friends about it. And then like, you know, word of mouth spreads like that, and people can be influenced by other people. So I feel like just spreading the good through that way would be like, I don't know, it would be amazing, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know that you know that your influence has actually reached not only our Career Center, but also another institution. So the Career Center came to that program last year, and they started to input and create programming where they are talking about identities in the workplace. I know they did 3 consecutive workshops in the fall that were geared towards all the students at the University of Maryland. So there was influence of you in that space. And then more recently, a colleague of mine at the University of Virginia reached out because they saw the new graphics for this year's conversation. And he was like, I would love to recreate that for our students here at UVA. So not only do you have an influence in this space here in Maryland, but you're broadening that gap to other institutions and to other spaces on our campus. And so I wanted to make sure that you are aware of that. And so transitioning a little bit into that Black Voices in Career Readiness piece, Bryan, you've obviously been someone in the workforce for a number of years now. What would you say are ways that you amplify your truth in the workspace, especially knowing that you are someone who works with a large number of student athletes, but a large number of Black male and female students?
Yeah, so, and it took me a long time to get here too, because I'll start off by saying when I first became a professional, a lot of advice that I got was just, oh, you need to dress a certain type of way. You need to distance yourself as, you know, as a professional and not a student. You need to create that gap so students know that you're a professional and, you know, they're here to get your services and your help. And, you know, at the time, you know, I was 25, 26. I'm like, oh yeah, great. Like I'm a Black professional in student affairs. This is great. But then I realized how that distance and that gap really affected, you know, my work and kind of the students' perceptions of me. I always had great relationships, but I'm like, by the time I got to Maryland, I'm like, I want to shift, you know, how I do and how I show up to work. So I don't think the last time you ever see me in a button up or a suit and a job probably will never happen again. But one, I'm always going to show up as me, whether that's, you know, how I dress, how I talk. If you come in this office, you're gonna hear some J. Cole, you might hear a little Tim's, you're gonna hear my music, you're gonna see how I decorate my space, but then of course you're gonna get, you know, a great advising appointment in a session, but I'm also going to give you the real keys on, you know, how to, you know, best, you know, prepare yourself for your life after college. So I think really just being who I am and letting students see that, because I think a student had sat down to me when I was at Westchester. I was sitting in my office with my suit on. He was like, you know, Bryan, I understand everything that you're saying and you're telling me about your experience, but I can never get to where you are. I'm looking at here and I'm seeing you in the suit. Like, that's just not me. And I don't think I can relate to that. And then, you know, after, you know, months and years later, I'm like, I have to show up in this space as me because I come from Philly. I can relate to the experience, but I need you to know that I came from there and I'm still me doing the work that I do. So I think one, just showing up, you know, how I dress, sweatpants, playing my music, office vibes, always chill. So, and I think that helps, you know, a lot of the young Black men and women that I advise.
And I think that's important, right? Bryan, you and I often have that conversation because I also show up in t-shirts and jeans and sweatpants, right? And I think we've even in the Maryland MDMade program have been intentional to say students, like, show up as you are. The professionals will adjust, because I think it is unfair of us to say you have to be dressed a certain way to show up to our programming, because what if the student doesn't have these things, right? And yes, depending on the industry you go into, there may be a culture shift in terms of like, you may need to be in a suit depending on what you're doing, but like, while you're here for 4 years, like, let's ease you into that so you can, whether through an internship or whatever, be able to start to gain some of that money to then be able to buy those things. But I don't think a first year or a second year should feel the pressure to come dressed up always in a professional, what we deem professional attire, right? And so I think, Max, that's where I want to transition to you. I think you have been, again, one of the leading student athletes I look at as an example of somebody who's had 2 internships with Microsoft, right? I mean, before we jumped into this podcast today, we were talking about like what was next for you. And so someone who's newer in the workforce, what have those experiences been like for you? And are there things that you feel like you wish you would have been a little bit more prepared for jumping into your internship roles?
So I guess I would say that like the experiences overall have been like pretty good. Like I've had like, I feel like I've over the time I've been in university and stuff like that, I've become better at becoming like my authentic self and just kind of acting as I am. Cause a lot of times before that, like, especially from high school and back, like I would code switch, like always, like really, really hard and stuff like that. But when I kind of went out to work in the summer, like in person last summer, and then like the summer before that, like I was just like, I'm just gonna be me. Like I'm gonna show up to work. I'm gonna wear a sweatsuit. I'm gonna wear jeans. I'm gonna wear my Jordans. I'm gonna wear what represents me. So I feel like, and then like also being in engineering, like software engineering in specific, like the clothing guidelines are extremely like lax. So like being in that kind of space like also helped because like there wasn't really much expectation. So like it gave me a lot of room to just like be myself in a way. But what was the second part of the question?
What are some things that you wish you would have been more prepared about for your experiences?
I would say like throughout being in school and before like going into internships and stuff like that, I was just kind of unaware of how much time like a lot of work actually takes, like going into like work and stuff like that. Because a lot of times it's like I'll do my homework, like I procrastinate a lot. Sometimes I'll wait till the day before, like 2 days before something is due to start a project, and then I'll just grind it out in like 1 or 2 days. But then like once I actually started working in the summer, it's like, okay, like you're assigned like some work, you're assigned a project or something like that. You work on it and you might like get it working and stuff like that. But just working in a company, it's not like it's your own work. You can't just throw something out there. Like you have to get everything approved. You have to go through like all of these, you kind of have to jump through all these hurdles to kind of like get your work approved and communicate back and forth with your team, get their input on it and stuff like that. So I think in a way, I was really used to just working on my own and having my own standard of work be like what is like the baseline. But in actuality, when you start working at a company, you have to collaborate with other people. You have to collaborate with your team. You have to make sure that everyone's on the same page. You have to make sure that everyone is agreeing. Like, so that would probably be one of the things that I like was not really prepared for. And it definitely took a lot of adjusting. My first internship, I had a lot more trouble with it, but during my second internship, I kind of like understood how to get the ball rolling in like those situations. But yeah.
And you had an added component, right? Like you are from the state of Maryland, you are at the University of Maryland, but your internship took you to the West Coast. Like talk about like even that experience. There is definitely a culture shift. I've lived on the West Coast, and there aren't as many Black folks out on the West Coast as there are here. So like, what was that experience and how did you navigate that piece?
That was a really big culture shift. I'm not going to lie. There would be some days in Seattle where I would drive and I would not see a single Black person all day, like besides my roommate. And I was like, dang, this is very crazy. Cause like just growing up, like all the places that I've kind of like lived in or like stayed at, like I'm at College Park right now. I grew up in Howard County, which is like one of the more diverse counties in Maryland. My family's from Georgia. So like everywhere I've kind of been, there's always been like a lot of Black people, to be honest. And going out to Seattle in the summer, it was a very, very big shift. And then just kind of like, especially with me, like stopping my code switching and stuff like that, there would be a lot of times where I'm talking and people are not understanding what I'm saying. just from using a lot of slang and stuff like that. And I'm just like, this is crazy. Like I'm getting, it took a while to get used to, because like every time I would say something, people are like, oh, could you say that again? I'm just like, all right, let me just like use normal language, I guess, around people. But like in certain aspects like that, it was just like, this is crazy. But I guess like, stuff is always going to be different when you move somewhere else. And then I would say like, just kind of like from being out in Seattle during the summer, I found like my own community of people as well. Because like, I would say like kind of tying it back to the first question about like going to a HBCU versus a PWI, I would say like one of the things that like I didn't quite necessarily have was like initially was the confidence within myself. So like kind of like how Bryan was talking about, like, when you're like in an HBCU environment around like all these successful Black people, you see that like success is like that can be the baseline for our community, and it kind of like instills that within you. And so like I think this summer it was very eye-opening to kind of see like we had like an entire like group me full of like all of the people of color interns within Seattle, like at all the different tech companies like Microsoft, Amazon, like all these places. And we would like hang out on the weekends and stuff like that. And just being surrounded by so many like smart young people like myself was just like, it was like a very eye-opening experience. And it helped me like kind of develop more confidence within myself, and also have like a safe space in a way, if that makes sense.
Max is out here dropping gems. Y'all need to pick up on this, because
seriously,
the job is going to take you different places. I never saw myself ever living on the West Coast, and I did it for 4 years, right? And again, like your internship experience or your work experience is going to take you anywhere. So like, again, going back to that confidence piece and building the community that you need, I really hope people who are listening to this episode are picking up on. And Bryan, I had to toss you this question because I think it's important, as it relates to the work that you do every day, but also what you're studying. And last year you were on the panel for the Black Voices program. And now I know you started to narrow down your focus for your PhD dissertation around anti-racist student athlete advisory practices. Tell us more about why you're leaning into that as something to study, but also why it's important for us to come and listen to you when you give this dissertation.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the plug right there. All right. So, and the dissertation topic, we're still narrowing it down, but specifically when we're talking about anti-racist practices, and I'm looking specifically at, revenue generating sports, so football and basketball. Even though, I was a track and field student athlete, looking back from my experiences from, coming from Philly to going to Delaware State, at Westchester, and even at Maryland, seeing so many of my friends and young Black men that participated in these sports that just knew that they were going to be professional, came to higher education, thought that they were going to use these tools to get them to be, pro, but that just didn't happen for them. And, time and time again, I'm like, okay, well, how can I use, from the experience that I had coming from Philly to being a student athlete and now as a professional, I'm like, I really have the lived experience, but then, also being a professional within higher education to kind of look at this at a more critical lens. So often I always speak from my experience, there are, student athletes, Black men that come into these, Power 5 institutions or just institutions, period, that want to be professional athletes that aren't really encouraged to like have majors like computer science or business or anything like that. So, okay, so you may not have had the skills in high school and you can't really fit into any of these majors in college. And, it's not really and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about a lot of white professionals that are staffed by athletic departments. Let me make sure. So if you don't fit in those majors, then I'm gonna just toss you in such and such major. You can go look up at academic clustering when there are more, maybe 30 or 40, student athletes in one particular major. That major could be, a major that has a lot of general electives that doesn't have a lot of math and science, or AKA pass-through majors. So I know that I can just dump you here so you can be, eligible to participate in your sport. You really don't know what that major is. You have no really career interest in that. And once you graduate, what do I do with a major in professional studies? Now I'm just kind of, left in limbo, because the chance that I thought that I was going to, go be professional, a 1.9% chance, didn't happen. I have this degree that I have no idea what to do now. So that just leaves a lot of our young Black men in a space of, identity crisis. Because I'm like, oh, well, I just wasted 4 or 5 years and I don't have my dream. What do I do now? So how can advisors who are a critical part of the, athlete experience really talk about how race plays a role into the everyday lives of these, young Black men that are coming here? So if we know that athletics has a corporate mission, and we know that Black bodies are being used to, have or get economic gain or revenue, like how can we prepare our young Black men to specifically talk about race? And a lot of white professionals, one, aren't equipped, two, don't know, and three, may not even want to talk about it. My job, from a white advisor's perspective, not all, but most are, I need to just make sure that you're eligible. We can't really get into the critical issues of, if the institution is benefiting off of you. I just know that I need to put you in professional studies. You need to graduate, and then, you can move on from there. But why is that culture like that? How can we specifically, address the issues of race, talk about systemic, issues of racism within athletic departments to help our young Black men succeed? So I think that's going to be, I'm talking about anti-racist, lens, looking at, these young Black men, their mindset coming into college and how they want to be professionals, the culture of academic advising, our sports teams, and then the culture of, senior leadership, and how we can talk about how to prepare young Black men. So still in its beginning phases, but that's definitely where this is going to end up going.
Listen, Bryan, you just said a whole word, and I appreciate it, right? Like, you're somebody I get to work with almost weekly. And I think it's important that we're having this conversation. And again, we're two Black folks having a conversation and we understand it. And so I think about how do we loop in some of our white peers to like jump into this conversation too, because they're needed. And I think, oftentimes folks look at me and I'm always like praising Max because computer science and going off and doing great things. Gerald, who's also on his team, is in the business school and going off to do great things. And I'm thinking like they get praises because they are in these majors where they are one of none, or that, it's harder to go through. And I think like if they can do it, anybody can do it as long as you utilize the resources that are around you. And there's a ton of resources that go beyond just like what MDMade is doing for students. And so this is why we often bring in some of our partners from campus, because I need there to be some of that give and take that our students can see. And as I talk about Max, who's sitting here, right? Like I often talk about him like he's never in our presence, but Max, you're a few months from graduation. What are some ways that you're going to continue to amplify your voice and tell your truth about your Black experiences in the workplace?
I would say like, just for example, like the panel that's gonna be going on next week, like I don't think that's something that I'm gonna stop doing. Specifically, like let's say I'm not necessarily in Maryland, like even putting on something in Seattle if I end up out there. Or I was also thinking about like potentially starting to do summits like during the summer with a few other people my age, putting on something alongside that. I feel like just having these discussions and keeping these discussions relevant is very beneficial for the community, and just continuing to do that whenever I can is like that's pretty much my goal, because I'm not gonna stop pretty much. Yeah.
Listen, Max, you always have a place back here in Maryland. So you want to come back February 2024, we will have you back here on this campus. And Bryan, like I mentioned earlier, I get the pleasure of working with you every day. And I know this May, you'll go back to the Black Student Athlete Summit to give yet another presentation. Would you like to tell our listeners about the Black Student Athlete Summit and why it's so important for you to speak there about the work that you're doing?
And going last year was my first time, attending the summit and presenting at the summit, because I've heard, from previous years, like how great it was. And I've been to some great conferences, but going to the Black Student Athlete Summit, if you've never been, you have to go. Student, professional, faculty, like you have to go and experience that, because one, showing up to a place it's just going to be for us, by us. I think that's amazing. But you get to hear about the great work that other people, from across the country, the work that they're doing within their departments, in their athletic departments, within their academic colleges. and one, learning about different resources, two, like connecting with those individuals and bringing some of those ideas back to your campus. So literally probably one of the best conference that I've ever been at, without giving up too much. So my presentation is called Flag on the Play, Disrupting the Corporate Mission of College Athletics. And it talks about how many athletic departments are equipped with white professionals that are not bold enough or ill-prepared to talk about how race and racism is talked about, experienced within athletic departments. So how can Black professionals that may be one or two, that are staffed within the department, really advocate for Black students, and how do they address some of the issues that they see at their institution? So we're gonna get into it. We got a lot to talk about, but it's really to empower, Black professionals and really help white professionals understand, okay, like how is this, racism, how does this exist at my institution, and how can I really gain some community to really make a difference?
Sounds like a phenomenal presentation. I'm hoping to be out in LA this May to witness that. But lastly, both of you, I want you to kind of explain why it's important for people to show up next Tuesday, Censoring Black Voices in Career Readiness. Why is it important for any individual to come to this presentation, whether they Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, college student, faculty member? Like, why is it important for folks to show up to this program?
I would just say, like, if you're interested at all in learning like anything, like that is enough reason in itself. Like, we're gonna have three great panelists, Chase Moore, Gail Miller-Myers, and Gus. Chase Moore, he's a legislative fellow at the U.S. House of Representatives. Gail Miller-Myers, she's a vice president of customer service at Dizion, a software company. And then Gus is the director of IT at UMD. So like all three of these people are going to be talking about like their experiences within the career space. So like whether you're Black, you're white, like anything, like you can take something away from this, because everyone has something to learn when it comes from being in these different career spaces. If you're interested at all in going into anything business related or anything like engineering related or like anything like law related, like these three people, like they're all in those distinct fields. So even if you're not interested in those spaces, you're still gonna like end up working like in a corporate space in some way, shape, or form. So I feel like just coming and being like a sponge and absorbing information, like I feel like that's something that everybody should really do, if that makes sense.
Right. And just to piggyback off that, you're about to hear from three amazing people, like really, really amazing people, and their unique experience. One, they're doing great in their careers right now, but what did it really take to get into that position? They got the degrees, but like, what did they have to jump through any hoops? Like, what did they have to go through to get them to where the point that they're at now? So I think one, just hearing that experience for anyone is going to be vital. And of course, you're going to have the opportunity to connect with other individuals, but then two, when you're hearing Black people talk about, their careers and where they are now, like maybe if it's someone that's, not a person of color, well, wow, like listen to all the hoops that they have to jump through. Like, is there anything in my space that we're not looking at? Mm-hmm. So coming and gaining that information, hearing the stories, connecting with people, but then taking all that information that you receive at this program and taking it back to your space to continue the conversation going, like that's going to be vital.
And then my bad.
No, good.
Just to hop off of that, like I feel like one of the most important parts of Black History Month is really just celebrating like the achievements that Black people have, like things that Black people have achieved, and looking at people that are currently doing extremely well for themselves throughout like all the adversity that they faced in their lives. I think that's something like we're looking at history right now in the making. So just coming out to like something like this, like learning about Black success, like that's like during Black History Month, I really think there's no reason not to.
No, I think that's really important, Max. And so as we start to wrap up this episode, which I think has been fire today, and I think both of y'all are truly doing great things individually, but also for the Black community, I think it's time for us to learn just a little bit more about who y'all are outside of the workspace, outside of being an athlete. And so we like to always wrap up our episodes with what we call rapid fire. So I'll throw out a question. Max, you'll answer first, followed by Bryan. So Max, what is your favorite Black clothing brand?
I would say so. There's this guy, like his brand isn't like quite official yet. He's on Instagram. His handle is the Soul King. He makes like a lot of anime and then like Marvel, DC like inspired like streetwear. He's one of my favorite. Yeah, he's probably my favorite clothing brand because all the stuff he makes is really quality. He also ran track. He went to University of Maryland Eastern Shore. He's a few years older than me, and like his stuff is really high quality, and I just support like everything he does for real. Yeah,
Love that. Brian, what you got?
So for me, it is a Black brand called LOA. One of my great friends that I ran track with back at Delaware State University, his handle is LOA.US. That's ELUE.US. Nigerian clothing brand. Like when I tell you the quality and the work that this man Chuka LOA puts into his work, into his clothing, it's beautiful, very high quality. But then the story that's behind the clothing brand as well, I think is one of the most profound things and one of the hardest working people I know. So LOA.US, definitely check it out.
I like that. So coming off of Rihanna's comeback at the Super Bowl this past weekend, let's talk about your favorite musical artist, current or all time.
I would say so. I have like two. I'd say current. My favorite artist is Playboi Carti, and then all time I'd probably say Tyler the Creator. Those are my like. I really like both of those artists.
Okay, one, J. Cole. J. Cole is always playing in my office. I was just playing the warm-up this morning. So that's current. All time, you gotta go with Michael Jackson, the greatest.
I knew you were going to say that.
Time. All right, I love me some Mike Jack, man.
How did I know that was coming? And now we know both of y'all are former track athletes and a current track athlete. Who's your favorite track athlete of all time? I'm intrigued about this one. There's so many to choose from.
It is so many to choose from. And I gotta go with the person that really kind of inspired me to run track, and that was Michael Johnson. You know, just hearing about his story, his experiences at Baylor, his book Slaying the Dragon. I really resonate with all that. So I definitely gotta give it to Michael Johnson.
I would say probably Nick Symmonds. He's the 800 runner. He's American. I don't know, like he has a YouTube channel and I watch a lot of his videos. He's like, I don't know, he's just like a cool guy. He's nice to look up to. He had the he had the American record for a little bit in the 800, and I think he's like top 3 all time, but he's definitely very inspiring. He wrote a book as well. Just his dedication to like everything throughout like his entire life was like very it was very nice to hear. And then like he also didn't have like a traditional like sports upbringing, because he ran Division III and then ended up like making it to Olympic trials, and then from Olympic trials he went to the Olympics, and then like that's kind of how everything kicked off. But yeah, he's probably my favorite track athlete.
Awesome. Now, Brian, you came in my office the other day and I said that you look like you were coming off of the movie Higher Learning. For those who are, older crowd, you know that reference. So what is your favorite all-time Black movie?
Oh, come on, man. That's a hard.
That's a fully loaded question because I couldn't answer that myself.
Yeah, so this is hard. So I'm gonna do my favorite, but then some honorable mentions. Like one, it's gotta be The Wood. The Wood is a classic Black movie. I could watch that every single day. And just because me and my friends relate to it so much. Me and my 2 friends, Amir and Chuka. Honorable mentions, of course, I gotta go with Friday. Lean on Me, Coach Carter. I'll stop there.
Okay.
I would say one of my favorites is probably, I really like Menace to Society. Menace to Society is one of my favorite movies. For honorable mention, I don't think Django really counts because it's Quentin Tarantino, but I like Django a lot. And then there is one other movie. I can't remember, but yeah.
Okay. And for the folks who don't know, Minister Society is old. I'm surprised you pulled that one out the bag.
Right.
Moonlight. That was another honorable one.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, that was a really good one too.
Yeah.
And our last question for rapid fire: favorite TV show, current or all time? And Max, yes, you can throw in some anime because I know you're a huge anime fan.
Yeah, I would have to go with Attack on Titan. It's been running for 10 years. It's gonna end this March. Yeah, it's my favorite show of all time. Yeah.
I honestly don't watch that much TV now. But all time, I'm always split. And what person isn't split over these two, Martin and Fresh Prince? I can still watch those every day. I can never, choose one of the over the other, but they're neck and neck.
But the question is, have you watched the Fresh Prince reboot, remake? I don't know what we're calling it.
I think
I haven't seen the reboot.
So
me neither.
Yeah.
So we're going old school Fresh Prince is what
yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to thank both of y'all for participating in such a great conversation today. Before we wrap up, share with our listeners how they can reach out to you or follow you for updates. So this is the time to drop your social or your LinkedIn, whatever that may be. Bryan, you want to go first? Oh, go ahead, Max.
Oh, my bad. My LinkedIn is Max Myers 13, and then on Instagram I'm MadMax 800 if y'all want to follow me.
And same here, LinkedIn, Bryan Pointer, Instagram handle, Twitter handle, _JustBLP. Always feel free to reach out.
Again, on tomorrow, Tuesday, February 21st, we are hosting Black Voices in Career Readiness. This is a panel discussion where we will center Black voices sharing their truths, how they advance joy and protect their peace on their career journeys. This has been another great episode of the MDMade Podcast. Remember to celebrate Black History Month in February, but also all year long. We'll see y'all next week.